What's up, guys? This is TheKephas.
Over the past few weeks, I've had a lot of fun sharing my experiences in World of Warcraft as a visually impaired player, showing how I navigate the game using my unique UI and a controller setup. Recently, I healed my very first dungeon after playing the game for over 18 years, and it was an amazing and fulfilling experience for me as a player. The journey, though, has got me thinking about a topic that currently resonates with many players: anxiety around group content like dungeons, especially when trying out new roles such as tanking or healing. I've seen this anxiety referred to as tankxiety or healer anxiety, and I wanted to address it because I've been asked about it frequently. The anxiety often stems from both social and performance pressures, and it's a very real issue that many players face. As someone with a visual impairment, I've developed insecurities that rise to the surface, particularly when it comes to performance-related anxiety. Early on in World of Warcraft, I didn't participate much in group content, and when I did, I was lucky enough to find a regular group of supportive players. I didn't mention my visual impairment at the time because I just didn't really want to make a big deal out of it. Fortunately for me, the people that I was running with were generally helpful and understanding, which made the experience manageable. But as the years have gone on and the game has changed considerably, the community today can be much less forgiving, especially with the ease of finding random groups through tools like the Dungeon Finder. My journey continued as I progressed through different expansions, gaining confidence in dungeons, but I still faced challenges due to my vision. But one of my biggest breakthroughs came during Wrath of the Lich King, when I joined a very large guild and found a group of players who eventually became my friends. A particular boss from Wrath of the Lich King that stands out to me is Scotty. It's a boss in Utgard Pinnacle, and in this boss fight, the boss is flying around on a dragon at the end of a hallway while ads spawn. You have to run down the hallway, kill the ads, and pick up the harpoons they drop, and then shoot those harpoons at the dragon, and then kill the boss. But while you're running down the hallway, the dragon will be breathing fire down one side of the hallway or the other. This mechanic was very difficult for me back then because I didn't have the UI that I have now. It didn't have the sophistication that modern mods provide, and even the game itself. So this boss fight was giving me a lot of trouble. When I was running this dungeon with my guild buddies, I just finally mentioned that, hey guys, I have a visual impairment, so if I could maybe get somebody to call out which side of the hallway the dragon is going to breathe on, that would help me out tremendously. My guildmates obviously had no problem doing this, and they even appreciated that I was open and honest about it. The reason why I share that story is to highlight how crucial that support system was for me. Accessibility, in my experience, isn't just about add-ons or UI adjustments, because the greatest accessibility tool I've ever had is a group of understanding players. However, as the game evolved and tools like the Dungeon Finder became more prominent, I found myself facing new difficulties. Grouping up with strangers who didn't know my limitations became intimidating, especially as dungeons grew more mechanically complex. I began to avoid group content altogether and eventually stopped running dungeons for several expansions, even as recently as Dragonflight. Eventually, WoW would reach a significant low point for me during the Shadowlands expansion, and for the first time since I had started playing the game, I chose to take an extended break. I didn't come back to the game until after that expansion had ended, and as the story goes for many WoW players like me, I started playing a different MMO called Final Fantasy XIV. And it was during my time with this game when my perspective on running group content like dungeons started to change. At that time, in order to progress in Final Fantasy XIV, you had to run dungeons with other people, and this might sound a little crazy to some, but when I reached that point in the game, I was so uncomfortable with the idea of running dungeons that I almost just quit playing the game outright. The thing is, I was really enjoying the game and I didn't want to miss out on it. So I bit the bullet and ran the first dungeon. Wasn't a big deal. So I ran the next one and the next one and the next one and worked my way through the entire campaign, at that time all the way through Shadowlands. Looking back on it now, I realized that it was the game's community as well as its more intuitive dungeon mechanics which helped me overcome my anxiety about running group content. This experience reignited my love for dungeons and group content, and I realized that a lot of the barriers I thought were physical were actually mental. Eventually, I had grown so comfortable in that game that I even started to branch out and try out different roles. I was tanking semi-regularly, and even though I have mentioned that I recently healed my first dungeon in WoW after so long, Final Fantasy XIV was actually the first time I had ever tried out healing in an MMO, and I healed through quite a few dungeons. Over the past year, I've found myself playing World of Warcraft more and more regularly. Honestly, I probably leveled up more than 20 characters just chain running dungeons in Mop Remix, and I've leveled up each class at least once in the War Within doing the same thing. It's hard to imagine a time when running dungeons wasn't part of my experience when playing World of Warcraft, and yet I don't know a single dungeon from Dragonflight, or Shadowlands, or BFA, or Legion, or even Warlords of Draenor. I never ran dungeons in any of those expansions. See, when you're visually impaired, it can be challenging to try new things because you experience everything differently from everybody else, like running a new dungeon, trying not to get lost, or fighting a new boss and trying to learn the mechanics and hopefully you don't miss anything. And when you're doing these things alongside other people who probably aren't going to understand because they don't know you personally, it can be very intimidating. But my mistake was thinking of this as a limitation rather than a barrier. A good example that highlights this is with a new dungeon in the War Within called the Dawnbreaker. In this dungeon, there are some new concepts added that are very divisive amongst the players. Some people hate this dungeon, and as someone who struggled with it, I kind of understand why. During boss fights, you are going to have to mount up and fly around, and you're going to be doing a lot of flying around in this dungeon, and this was very difficult for me trying to do this during boss mechanics. It was very disorienting, and I even got kicked during the second boss fight because I landed in a bad spot and pulled a bunch of ads. And so I was a little bit concerned about this dungeon because it was giving me so much trouble, and my first instinct was to maybe not run this one. Maybe if I get this in dungeon queues, I'll just leave. And that felt like it would be unsatisfactory. It would be very inconvenient for me having to sit through a deserter debuff, and it would be very inconvenient for other players who get the misfortune of getting grouped up with me. So I messed around a little bit in follower dungeons, tried it out a couple more times, and was still having a lot of trouble, and so I sought some advice. And I got some pretty obvious but very helpful advice, which was turn off skywriting and go back to standard flight. And this is exactly what I needed to do to make the dungeon easier. With standard flight, I have better control when I'm in the air. I can hover and I can react better to where I'm at, and I'm not getting disoriented so easy. During the second boss fight, I can wait and see where my tank lands and then follow them, and that way I'm not accidentally pulling any ads. And ever since I did this, this dungeon became a breeze, a dungeon that felt completely unreachable, and one that I even considered just abandoning outright suddenly is not a problem at all. One of the biggest things that I've learned when dealing with this type of anxiety is that it all really just boils down to mindset. If I may borrow from the Bible, you have to take every thought captive. In the context of running dungeons in MMOs, you have to stop viewing your mistakes as letting your team down or getting kicked as some permanent indictment against you as a player. Whether you're running a new dungeon or you're fighting a new boss and learning new mechanics, or you're trying out a new role, you probably won't pull as many ads when you're a new tank, and you may not heal as efficiently when you're a new healer. Somebody might even get killed occasionally, and it might be your mistake. And yeah, you're going to come across players that don't understand that. They don't care to understand. They're just entitled and impatient. And that probably isn't going to change. But you can't view their reaction to you as evidence that you suck, because really, you're just new. Everyone deserves the chance to learn, no matter how long it takes or what challenges they face. Whether you're new to the game, trying a new role, or dealing with a disability like me, you deserve the same opportunity to enjoy the game as everyone else. The fear of making mistakes or facing negativity shouldn't stop you from participating. At the end of the day, World of Warcraft is a game, and games are meant to be enjoyed. While the community has its toxic moments, and Blizzard could do a whole lot more to foster positivity, especially when it comes to helping new players, the key is to not let negative experiences define your enjoyment. This is why I'm such an advocate for solo content. It's important because it gives people a break from the pressure of group content. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't avoid group content altogether, especially if it's something that you really want to try. With the right mindset and a lot of perseverance, you can overcome any anxiety or any hurdle and find joy in the challenges that group content presents. Don't make the same mistake that I made. Don't let hurdles become barriers. Don't limit yourself in life or in the game, whether it's tanking, healing, running dungeons, or whatever content that the game provides that interests you. Don't let anxiety or the fear of failure hold you back. The key to taking the first step is the step itself. Just do it. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll become. And I want to reassure you, as a visually impaired person, that any limitations that you think you have are often mental rather than physical. With a little persistence, support, and self-confidence, you can break through them. So get out there, tank a dungeon, heal Mythic Plus, whatever you want to do, just go for it. You got this.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.